Staring down at the wolf pup next to the road in the snowstorm, Tramp Simpson was unsure of what to do. He decided to rescue the cub anyway, and less than an hour later, the pup did something shocking. Tram was driving on the whitest road he'd ever seen when he noticed it, a bundle on the shoulder of the road. The snow was coming down heavier than before, and for a moment he thought it was a discarded blanket or jacket. But as he passed, Tram saw it was something else, something bigger, and this something needed his help. He started braking carefully. There was ice on the road, the snow was coming down in blinding veils, and losing control of the truck would send him tumbling into the ditch lining the asphalt. Tram had an extra weight of responsibility on his shoulders. If he didn't deliver his cargo in time, people would die. He had to protect it at all costs. Tram opened the door and stepped onto the snow. The whiteout was almost complete. He could see no more than 10 feet ahead of him. He made a mental calculation and walked back to where he thought he had seen the strange body. In the harrowing conditions, it took him almost 10 minutes. When he reached the spot, Tram froze in his tracks and looked around instinctively. This was an adolescent wolf pup, maybe 6 months old. There was no pack around, so Tram relaxed a little, thinking that he wasn't in imminent danger. But the cub was. Unfortunately, he was losing valuable time. Could he afford to waste precious minutes to help the cub? He pushed the thoughts of his cargo and its urgency to the back of his mind and focused on the wolf. It had been hit by something, a passing car or truck, he guessed, and it was just regaining consciousness. Tram approached carefully. The pup was only slightly smaller than an adult wolf, and if it suddenly recovered, it was sure to panic. This could be dangerous. He stepped forward and then slowly sank to his haunches. The pup's eyes were open, but not quite focused yet. He reached out and stroked the wolf's side. There was no reaction except for a reflexive ripple of skin. Tram let his open hand slide down the wolf's legs and then along its spine. Nothing broken, he thought, but there could be internal bleeding. No way to be sure about that. Tram remained aware of the ticking clock in his mind. He simply had to get the cargo to its destination in time. The snowstorm made for slow going already, and now this. He was losing precious minutes. But there was no way in the world he was going to leave this animal by the side of the road. Here goes nothing, Tram thought as he slid his hands under the wolf. It yelped slightly and nipped at him half-heartedly. Then it relaxed and lay limply in his arms. With the wolf held tightly against his chest, Tram trundled back to the truck through the blinding snow. He made a bed for the cub in the sleeper cab with some blankets and laid it there. There was a gas station 30 miles ahead in Yellowknife. He would get a bowl and water for the animal once he got there and then decide on his next step. With renewed urgency, Tram fired up the engine and edged back into the road. He radioed his delay to the office and adjusted his estimated time of arrival. He told them nothing about the wolf in his sleeper compartment. Then he pressed down on the accelerator. Getting the cargo to its destination in time was still possible, but it would take all of his driving skills in these conditions. The call for Tram to make this haul over the ice roads to Detta in North Canada had come in only 3 days earlier. A particularly virulent H3N2 subtype of the flu virus had broken out in the small community. This virus changes often, so it's challenging to create a vaccine well in advance of the flu season. People were dying, and the virus was spreading like bad news in an election year. Usually, vaccines would be flown in, but with the unusually harsh weather this season, planes couldn't get off the ground. Transporting the life-saving medication by road was the only option. Treacherous winter conditions like black ice and whiteouts posed serious risks on northern highways. Roads became deadly with heavy snow, freezing rain, and blizzards creating slippery and dangerous passages. For Tram's company, he was the only driver capable of making a high-speed haul in whiteout conditions on ice roads and getting the cargo delivered on time. When the situation had been explained to him, Tram accepted the contract without hesitation. It was in his nature to help. He was now on the last stretch of road to Yellowknife. From there, it was an ice road all the way to Detta. That part was the most challenging, and there were no guarantees he would make it. The last few minutes to Yellowknife felt like traveling through a chaotic battleground. Cars and trucks were scattered across medians and shoulders, unlike anything he'd ever witnessed. All the time, Tram was aware of the wolf in the sleeping compartment. He reached out to touch it a few times, a gesture designed to comfort the animal. The wolf growled softly each time. But it wasn't aggressive. The growl was more a warning that the animal didn't want to be touched, and Tram respected that. He would see if he could get help in Yellowknife. To make up for lost time, Tram decided to take a back road to the town. He estimated there would be less traffic, but it proved to be no better. The snow was tightly packed, and it turned the road into a sheer sheet of ice. Driving at a mere 20 miles per hour felt like a marathon for his knuckles. Close to town, he fell in behind a convoy of trucks inching their way forward. At the bottom of a hill was a traffic light, and it suddenly turned red. As Tram hit his own brakes, the wolf in the back tumbled off the makeshift bed into the footwell. It yelped and scrambled back onto the blankets again. When Tram turned to make sure that the animal was okay, it bared its teeth and growled again. Apparently, the wolf was quite content to ride along, but wanted to be left alone entirely. Then, another thought struck Tram. It was possible the cub was still a little groggy from the accident that had left it comatose next to the road and was still slowly regaining its senses. But what would happen once it was entirely conscious? Would it attack in an effort to get out of the truck? Tram didn't know. It unsettled him even more when he thought about the possibility of a wolf attack in the confines of his cabin on an ice road during a whiteout. Everything about that possible scenario was terrifying. The only alternative, though, was to stop the truck and put the wolf on the side of the road again. And he wasn't prepared to do that at all. Not until he had the animal checked out and was sure of the extent of the wolf's injuries. Tram skirted the town and pulled into a gas station to fill up and check his rig before undertaking the last leg of his journey over the perilous ice road. He made sure the truck's cooling system was in good shape, then looked for radiator leaks, bulging hoses, and damaged clamps. Colder temperatures made truck engines work harder, and this could lead to overheating. When he turned back to his truck, something struck him from behind. Dazed, Tram scrambled to his knees. He was surrounded by 3 men, each wearing a ski mask, and each gripping a pistol. All 3 barrels were pointed steadily at his head. Behind the men was an SUV with snow chains on the tires. They must have driven onto the forecourt while he was checking his engine. He hadn't noticed them until it was too late. "Keys," the one man barked. "In the truck," Tram said. "They're in the ignition." One man strolled over to his rig, and the other 2 got into the SUV. They drove in a wide semicircle to make sure their partner got into Tram's truck safely, and then headed out onto the road. It was only then that Tram remembered the wolf in the back. He opened his mouth to shout a warning, but thought better of it. The hijacker had pocketed his firearm before he stepped up into the truck. He was no threat to the wolf. But was the wolf a threat to him? On that count, all bets were off. The question in Tram's mind was answered even before he could stagger to his feet. The driver's side door flew open seconds after it had slammed shut. The hijacker came tumbling out with the 70-pound adolescent wolf on his back. The animal was snarling and growling, an entirely different sound from the warning growls it had made when Tram tried to touch it. The wolf was now furious, in full attack mode, and lethal. Hijacker and wolf fell into the ground with an audible thud. The hijacker tried to scramble to his feet and fumbled for the pistol in his jacket pocket. But the wolf was on top of him in less time than it took Tram to take a breath. The 2 bodies rolled over twice again. The wolf had the hijacker by the arm and rolled on top of him. The man squealed like a toddler on a playground, jerking his arm around to shake the wolf off. But the animal stuck, like cotton to Velcro. Tram made his way over to the fracas as quickly as he could. He had no idea what he would do when he reached them. How does one get an almost fully grown wolf in full lethal attack mode off its victim? He didn't know, but he knew he would have to intervene if he was going to save the hijacker's life. When he was a few feet away, the animal stood back, looked Tram squarely in the eyes, and turned to hop back into the truck's cabin. The hijacker was left on the cold cement, sobbing and clearly frightened out of his wits. Sirens sounded from a distance. The hijacker heard it too and tried to scramble to his feet, but Tram knocked him out with a well-timed blow to the jaw. Then he sat down on top of the hijacker and waited for the police to arrive. Explaining the scenario to the officers took some doing. When Tram told them the man had been attacked by a wolf while attempting to steal his rig, the officers looked at him in disbelief. "Have you been drinking?" one young officer asked. Tram shook his head. Then he explained about picking the wolf up from the side of the road. "I need to get it to a vet," he said. "I don't know how badly it's hurt." "Wait," one officer said, shaking his head. "You're traveling with a wolf in your cabin, and you want to get back on the road so you can take it to a vet?" "I am," Tram said, trying to make it sound as natural as he could. "Is there a vet in Yellowknife?" The same officer shook his head again, this time with a sideways smile on his face. "Vet's stuck in Detta," he said. "He flew up there 3 days ago, and now he can't get back. You're going to take the wolf to Detta? In the cabin of your truck? Across the ice road?" Tram nodded. "It needs doing," he said, "and there's nobody else that will do it, so I will." 2 days later, an exhausted Tram drove into the outskirts of the tiny town of Detta. The miles across the ice road had allowed for a bond to form between him and the wolf. About 60 miles from Yellowknife, the cub had abandoned its spot in the sleeping cabin and climbed onto the passenger seat next to him. It still wouldn't allow Tram to touch him, but quietly stared out the windscreen as if it was a co-driver. When he arrived in town, Tram offloaded the vaccines on time and asked around for a vet. When the wolf was given a clean bill of health, he had the next difficult decision to make: how to release it in the wilderness. The vet, it turned out, had the best advice. "The animal seems attached to you in a weird sort of way. I suggest you let it hang around with you for as long as it wants. When it feels ready to return to the wild, it will probably do so of its own accord." And this is how the legend of Tram Simpson and his wolf co-driver on the ice roads of Canada started. It is still told around dinner tables and in drinking holes all across the Great North. What a great story! Have you ever come across a wolf or other wild animal injured and lying next to the road? Would you risk your own safety to help a potentially lethal creature? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. For now though, that's it from us. Catch you in the next video.